And welcome to the Hey Boomer Show, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. Today, we're going to be talking about climate activism, and we will be looking at it through the lens of collaboration between generations. Coincidentally, the ICC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's the United Nations body for assessing the science related to climate change, has released a new report today. And at 2:00, they are going to be live streaming a press conference to go over their findings in that report. And so I learned about this two ways. My guests told me about it a few days ago, and I heard about it on NPR this morning. So maybe it's not a coincidence that we have Samuel and Francis on Hey Boomer today. Samuel Rubin co-founded Yay Impact, a social impact agency rooted in the power of grassroots community organizing and storytelling, and the Hollywood Climate Summit, an international annual gathering that fosters multi-generational and youth-led story-driven efforts to showcase environmental action in the entertainment industry. Samuel was born and raised in Barcelona, Spain, and he began producing films to ignite positive change. He has overseen campaigns such as Can You Hear Us for Hulu's I Am Greta show, a documentary, and previously Youth v. Gov on Netflix. Samuel is active in the film and TV industry and has been included in the 2022 Grist 50 Fixers list for his role in flipping the script on climate change within Hollywood. He also received the Co-Generate Innovation Fellowship for his intergenerational field building with the Hollywood Climate Summit. Francis Stewart is a physician, a retired U.S. Navy captain, and a veteran climate campaigner. She serves as the co-chair of the Education Committee for Elders Climate Action. She is a chapter chair and mentor for Climate Reality and the policy director for Climate Action Now. She is an En-ROADS Climate Ambassador and an Environmental Voter Project volunteer. Francis is very much the scientist, and I look forward to hearing both perspectives as we go into this show. But before I bring them on, just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. I want to invite you to the Boomer Banter. The Boomer Banter is a monthly gathering that we get together as a community to talk about topics that are of interest to everybody in the Boomer community. We laugh, we connect, we share insights, we have conversations, we go into breakout rooms to have intimate conversations, we come back to the main room, and it meets monthly on the third Tuesday of every month. So the next banter is going to be tomorrow evening from 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern Time. And we look forward to inviting all of you to join us. So if you're interested in becoming part of the banter, it is a membership group. And I am giving you the opportunity to join us at no cost this Tuesday if you'd like to try it out. So just drop me an email at wendy@heyboomer.biz, and I'll send you the private link to our Zoom meeting, and you can have a fun conversation. Oh, we're talking about humor. That's what we're talking about tomorrow. Okay, one more thing. I met somebody this weekend who is looking for a kidney donor. Now, I have a cousin that received a kidney from a stranger. because they just felt like that was the right thing to do. And the person I met, Adam Lowe, is also looking for somebody who might graciously and feel driven, whatever, feel led to donate a kidney. If you think that you might be interested in finding out more, finding out if you might be a qualified donor for Adam, you can email kidney, the number 4, Adam @gmail.com. And we would all be very grateful, obviously, but Adam more than any of us, for him to find the kidney that he needs to continue living a healthy life. So that's kidney, the number 4, Adam @gmail.com. Okay, and with that, I am going to bring Samuel and Frances on to the show. And thank you very much for joining us today, Samuel and Frances. I'm so glad to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. So I mentioned that the ICC has just released their report, and Samuel, you said you had had a chance to look at it. Would you give us, without getting too technical, a brief overview of what we could look for in this report?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to also emphasize that the IPCC report in itself is the result of a making collaborative process among hundreds of scientists and climate experts from all over the world, some of them who have years of experience, decades of experience. So the process in itself is also very intergenerational. And today's assessment release is the sixth chapter, so to say, that they have released in 2018. And the IPCC report is not theoretical, it's very factual, it's very practical, and it's a compilation of all the different scientific findings that the group of scientists have located all over the world. So for this release, the biggest highlight is that we are running out of time to make sure that we save the planet and avoid the collapse of many different species that right now are in risk of extinction. It's not a positive headline. It's unfortunate that human events and actions have taken us where we are right now, but there is still a small fraction of opportunity to revert the current course. Since the beginning of the century, according to the report, temperatures have risen already 1.1. And as we all know, we have to make everything we can to avoid exceeding the 1.5 degrees increase. Right now, according to the report, that is expected and projected to happen in less than 10 years if we keep at the current pace, which is why we have to do everything possible to reduce emissions and change the energetic supply.
Thank you. And I think that's I know that's part of the reason I wanted us all to get together today as an intergenerational conversation, because, it can't just be the boomers or the older adults that are doing the work. It can't just be the younger people that are making the noise. So Frances, tell me about your work and how this has been an intergenerational effort to try and save our planet.
A lot of the work that I do, although not all of it, is with Elders Climate Action. And Elders Climate Action is nationwide in the U.S. And we do a lot of work that's intergenerational. One of our key partners in that is Mom's Clean Air Force. That gives us an opportunity to work with parents, because they're dads in Mom's Clean Air Force too, and with kids of all ages. The youngest child I've worked with so far was 18 months old. So did some advocacy up on the Hill with a advocacy team with two moms, an 18-month-old, 2 high school students, and 2 ECA members. So we made quite a team. But there are lots of opportunities. When we have a college student intern to work with, when we are working with local groups. There are lots of opportunities for collaboration there. We also collaborate with groups through US CAN, the US Climate Action Network. And there are all sorts of groups in US CAN, but youth are very well represented in that, and that gives us a lot of opportunities to do things like during COVID, it was difficult for people to do things like the Fridays for the Future strikes. And particularly that was a concern for elders who were going to be more susceptible to serious COVID infections. So we were one of the groups that did the shoe strike, where you basically put out shoes to represent the people who would be out there filling those shoes if it wasn't for social distancing from COVID.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard of that one. Samuel, you've done a lot of work, co-generational work, and that's why you kind of got this fellowship. Can you tell us some about what your work has been focused on?
Yeah, well, I think I'm currently 27 and I grew up as a child actor. So since I was very young, I always was surrounded by older folks. And later on, I started producing at age 16. So I had to leverage those multi-generational relational skills to fund, develop, and get support for the projects and initiatives that I was involved. And so for over a decade, I have been supporting various youth-led organizations in the entertainment industry with the aim of uplifting diverse creators and equip them with the tools and resources to distribute and create their stories. And I think that process in itself needs to be inherently intergenerational, and it needs to uplift and raise awareness of our environmental crisis and why this affects all of us. And it's an intersectional issue that is interconnected with so many other issues and themes that we so deeply care about, like gender justice, racial justice, and so forth. And so as a social impact producer, I specialize in leveraging the power of storytelling in activating and educating and mobilizing audiences for different issues, including climate action. But that wouldn't be possible without the use of intergenerational efforts and the support of so many organizations who are bringing age diverse communities together, like Cogenerate, which provided me with a research fellowship and a cohort with another 14 amazing individuals of all ages, many of them who have been in your show, who are doing various initiatives with the aim of improving social justice, improving social impact with the use of intergenerational strategies.
So why do you think it has been such a challenge to bring the different generations together? The climate crisis affects all of us. And yet it seems like, there's blame going on from each end of the generations. What do you think is some of the challenges, and how do we overcome those? Frances, do you want to start?
I think part of it is that there's so much going on that people who are aware of social and environmental issues may find it hard to know where to start or where to focus. And then there are a lot of people of all generations, but particularly older people who just are focused on their day-to-day lives, sometimes because their day-to-day lives are very difficult. They're having health problems, financial problems, a whole host of things, sometimes just because that's what they're used to doing, that maybe they thought that when you got to a certain stage in life, that's what you did. So that helping people expand their horizons a little bit, and also finding things that they can do, because it's pretty easy to look at the state of the world and go, okay, this is totally hosed, I think I'm going to play pinochle or hide under the bed. But to come up with things that will make a difference and that are practical, and people to do them with, that no individual, I don't care if you're Bill Gates or the Dalai Lama or the Secretary of the UN or Joe Biden or whoever, no one person or no one very small group of people could possibly solve the climate crisis. But many of us together, and it doesn't have to be anywhere near everybody. I mean, certainly the data we have on social movement suggests that about maybe 3.5% of people, which is a lot of people, but that's a whole lot less than 100%. That small percentage can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry to hear you say that a lot of people feel like they can't make a difference, because that's a lot of what this show is about, finding ways to make a difference. And I think being involved. So Samuel, what do you see as some of the challenges of bringing the generations together to talk about climate, which is our issue today?
Yes, I think that, intergenerational dynamics are challenging because they replicate the power structure that we are familiar with. I mean, we all in this planet have parents. There is not a single person in this planet that hasn't had, biological parents. And even if they don't have a traditional familiar structure, they will see someone as a paternal figure, or even the lack of thereof will cause an intergenerational dynamic that is unique. And same with educators, no? The majority of us have been schooled by teachers who are of different ages, and so there is a lot of studies that prove that when we think of intergenerational dynamics, our relationship with our parents, our relationship with our educators greatly influence and impact how are we going to be able to cooperate with different peoples of all ages throughout our lifetime. And then that happens again in the workplace, it happens again in community organizing, and we replicate and mirror some of the behaviors and impulses and unique traits that we have developed in that regard. And I think that I know that because I had a great relationship with my grandparents, and because I always, like, my first romantic partner was way older than me. Like, there is a lot of unique life traits that definitely made me more flexible to intergenerational cooperation. But I also know that that's not a perfect and a smooth process. And a big example of that is, for example, as in regards to accessibility and inclusion. No, I'm hard of hearing. I have a 57% hearing loss, and that also causes my speech to be impaired. And when I show up to a lot of community spaces and I require accommodations such as closed captions, such as other, if I'm in a physical event, sitting in the front, etc., I realized that, that is something that is very intergenerational in itself, because 70% of people over 65 are going to have some kind of ADA disability. And so when we talk about intergenerational complications, it's also spaces that are not accommodating folk with disability. It's also the patronizing and the invalidation of young people of any age not knowing what the struggle, what the effort is behind someone's sustained movement. And I think in the climate movement, to wrap up my thoughts, there is a tendency right now to project the idea that, oh, Greta Thunberg is the only climate activist. And I say that, having done the impact campaign of Greta Thunberg documentary. The whole point of Can You Hear Us, and why the name of the campaign is Can You Hear Us, is because there is so many more people other than just one individual, one young climate activist. And even if one climate activist rises to the occasion, it's because it is doing so on the shoulders of so many generations that came before to fight for clean air, for clean water, and so many other human rights. Like, for example, the civil rights here in the United States. No, we wouldn't have, the different constitutional amendment. Women wouldn't have the vote suffragette today if it wasn't because so many folks who are, historically involved in so many different social movements. And that's why intergenerational lessons learned are essential in order to carry on their legacy.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I was very involved as a young woman in several different areas of our society. And I love being around the passion of the youth. that they bring to the movements, you know, and they're at least there's a belief that we can make a change, we can make a difference, and I want to see that more in the like Elder Climate Action and the older organizations that are trying to make a difference. So I think, yeah, I'm excited about that. So let's talk about some ways that people can make a difference. I think you mentioned about the peace accords and what you're seeing there. David asked about international cooperation. So what are some of the things that we can do as individuals, but also as part of groups that we can do to make a difference?
I think there's so many possibilities, and no one's going to do everything. No one should even try to do everything. But they range from things in our in our homes, like for people in the United States with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a huge push to electrify buildings, electrify homes. That's extremely important in fighting climate change. And the tax credits, and for lower income people, the tax rebates are going to make a lot of things possible to make our homes more energy efficient, to get rid of old fossil fuel appliances and replace them with modern, more efficient, more effective electric appliances. Lots of changes that we can make in our own homes, in our own daily lives. But going beyond that, if I had to pick only one thing to do, I would say vote. This is an election year for most people, but voting is really fundamental. And also finding one or more groups that you feel like you can work with. It might be something through your church. It might be a professional group. I spent most of the last couple of days in a conference of medical professionals concerned about climate change. It might be people in your neighborhood. There's many possibilities, and then taking action as a group. That could be something very public, like going to a protest, but it could be emailing your congresspersons, your local representatives, your governor, about the changes that you want to see them make and what your priorities are. A lot of it's just learning.
Frances, I just put something up, the thirdact.org. You mentioned they're doing a protest tomorrow, or action tomorrow.
Tomorrow is the day of action, and they're going to be about 50, at least 50 actions across the country. I haven't checked the map since last week, and sometimes they pop up at the last moment. And those are actions that are big enough that people submit it. Some people will be doing something in their own yard or in their own house. But Third Act is a organization that Elders Climate Action works with closely. It's organized by Bill McKibben, who many of you may know has been working on climate change for many years. And for people 60 and older. And a lot of their focus is in moving money away from investing in fossil fuels. So what will be happening tomorrow for the Day of Action is targeting 4 of the big banks, Citibank, Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, that have the biggest investments in fossil fuels, and asking them to move their money out of that into more productive uses, things that are better for the environment and for society. That'll be done in a lot of different ways. I'm living right outside of DC. The big Day of Action in DC, in about 36 minutes, the vigil will start. There's going to be a rocking chair vigil with 50 painted rocking chairs in front of these 4 banks, and there will be people there rocking and maybe rolling until 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. There also will be more typical sorts of things, like there'll be an interfaith prayer service tomorrow, there'll be an interfaith walk, there'll be a rally, there'll be a march, there'll be big puppets and music and chalk art. And although this is very much organized by Third Act, we're hoping and expecting there will be people, of all ages there, because this is not just an issue for people, over 60, but it's a great opportunity for people over 60 to get involved. And we also have some very cool rocking chair rebellion shirts, I think, still available.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will be at the Beverly Hills Third Act March tomorrow at 10 a.m. If anyone is in Los Angeles, we are meeting at 10 a.m. Pacific time. But like Frances said, everyone can go to the Third Act portal and find another event nearby. It's on thirdact.org and then dash National Day of Action, but you can find it on the landing page. And I agree, Frances, people of all ages should be there. I mean, I participated last year in a very similar event that was organized by youth-led organizations, and it literally was like exactly the same type of format. And organizations like Third Act and Elder for Climate Action weren't there because they didn't even know they could join. No? And so now I think it's very important that as this type of effort happen, to make sure that we build intergenerational coalition, because we are going to be so much more powerful if we all show up at the same time. And to your point, Wendy, about action, taking action, yes, collective action is imperative to solve the climate crisis, but we are all individually going to be doing that differently because we have different skills, different capacities, different abilities. And so one of the specific goals of the Can You Hear Us campaign was to provide people with resources that they could customize and better understand how their skills and interests could untap the most impactful action items that they could take in the climate movement. And so we put together a 3-question action quiz that anyone can go to canyouhearit.org and take, and it will ask you briefly how much frequently can you engage in climate action. A few hours a week, a few hours a month, every day. Not everyone is going to have the same capacity. What are the issues that you care most about? What are some abilities that you have that you are most expertise, that you have the biggest expertise in? In my case, storytelling, communication, that can be leveraged for many different specific purposes. So I encourage anyone to visit the Take Action quiz, and also the why actions like tomorrow are so important is because of what the IPCC is telling us today, is that we have to divest, we have to stop funding current and future fossil fuel projects. I don't know if people know that in the United States, Biden just approved the Willow project, which equals to 60 coal plants in the Arctic, in Alaska. Uh, you know, Energy independence is super important, and anyone who brings that up as an issue is rightfully doing so. But precisely because we need to be energetically independent, we need to have as much clean energy available here in the United States: solar, wind, hydrogen, all of the above, and stop creating new projects like the Willow in Alaska. So anyone that can call their congressman, that can call the administration and advocate against this type of fossil fuel expansions is also taking very productive steps in climate action.
Yeah, and there's a comment here that says, even if you can't come in person, if you can share that this is going to happen on your social media posts, in emails to friends that you think might be able to come in person, or write letters or reshare. I mean, this is urgent, people. This is not just, a conversation that we're having. This is our lives. This is the lives of our children. And yeah, it's super important. So yeah, Samuel.
I also want to say that I think the person that put that comment is Sherry Stark, who is actually behind the scenes helping with the action tomorrow. So absolutely, I mean, there are so many amazing volunteers and team members who come together to make these opportunities happen. And it is also about celebrating the joy in the movement. Of course, we don't want those banks to be funding fossil fuels, but we also want to get to know each other, make new relationships, build bridges, and create resilience so that we can get through this together.
And can I just say how important that is too? Because, we know as elders, adults, whatever you want to call us, that loneliness is an epidemic, and being part of a movement,
Yes.
building those bridges. But we also know now with the young people, particularly with the isolation that happened in the pandemic, mental health issues are huge. And part of that is the loneliness that they're experiencing. So coming together in groups like this and feeling the power of a movement, I mean, there's nothing like it. I've been involved in this, and what's more important right now than saving our planet? Before we get close to the end, Samuel, I wanted you to talk about the Co-Generate fellowship that you received. What is the work that you'll be working on with that? And does that tie in with Can You Hear Us, or is that different?
Well, I actually discovered Co-Generate in the first place thanks to Can You Hear Us, because the Can You Hear Us campaign had one of the main desired outcomes to fostering intergenerational movement building, and we obviously had to go and meet some of the frontline organizations who are already doing that, and Co-Generate has been doing that for many years. People might know Co-Generate by their former name, Anchor, but basically Anchor Co-Generate supports a lot of community members, researchers, innovators like myself and so many others develop their community projects and initiatives in a way that brings change makers and people from different generations together to fix social issues that affect everyone. Like, for example, the one you mentioned, isolation, which obviously is an intergenerational issue, everything mental health related. And we have so many different understandings of mental health as you ask different people in generation, which is why this type of intergenerational collaborations are so important. But yeah, my role in the Co-Generate Fellowship, and for anyone who might be interested in checking it out, because they have a lot of opportunities for people who are doing this kind of work, like yourself or anyone in the audience who might be listening right now. You can go to cogenerate.org. I actually don't know if it's cogenerate.org or .com. I think it's .org.
I think it's .org, yep.
Yes, and check out the Innovation Fellowship cohort members. There is 15 of them. I'm representing the Hollywood Climate Summit and other initiatives in the intergenerational climate space, like Can You Hear Us? But basically, it's an 8-month program where every month we get together for 3 hours, the entire cohort. We have speakers, we solve problems in a co-generation collective fashion. We learn how to navigate the challenges that usually come up when you try to do that, which is quite often. And most importantly, we inspire each other and create that resilience and togetherness that is so important, not just in climate, but in any social justice movement.
All right, thanks. We're seeing a lot of comments here of people that are feeling passionate about this and are sharing. So thank you, Doris, Anne, Josephine, Martha, for sharing out about some of this and for listening today, and David. So Frances, what are your biggest concerns with where we are with the climate crisis and the climate movement?
I think in terms of the crisis, I mean, we're behind. If we had, when people first started to really understand this crisis, and the first things that you see, knowing about carbon dioxide in the air, increasing temperature, go back to the 19th century. But 30 to 40 years ago, actually the fossil fuel industry scientists were some of the first to actually see this. But unfortunately, instead of bringing it forward, they covered it up and actually pushed in the opposite direction. So for that and for many other reasons, we're about 30 years behind in trying to solve this. And the carbon dioxide we put into the air today most of it will be there hundreds of years from now. So lost time, this is a little bit like you're trying to fill up like you have a bathtub that's overflowing. The more that goes in, the bigger mess you've got. So we really have to turn this around relatively quickly. But yeah, I used to be a naval officer. I know you can't change, say, the course of a battleship or an aircraft carrier very quickly. Society, the whole world, takes even longer. But that's not a reason not to do it. It's a reason to try to move faster. Also have some concerns in the U.S. and probably in other places that I'm not as intimately familiar with some of the the pushback from the fossil fuel industry, from the amount of polarization that we see in climate politics in the U.S., which is more so than in a lot of other countries, and that limiting some of the things that we can do, and people getting discouraged, thinking this is just a hill we can't climb. This is something that we can't do. And I understand that. There are days that I get discouraged, but I think there's so much we can do if we work together, if we understand that this is something that we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives in one way or another. This is not something that is going to be solved next week. Something that if Samuel has grandchildren, they'll probably still be dealing with in one way or another. That's not a terrible thing. I mean, human beings have faced all kinds of challenges we've overcome in the past. This is just the latest one, and maybe the most important one. And I really believe we can do it. But it's, we have to believe that, and we have to not just believe it, but we have to take action on a continuing basis.
Thank you. Samuel, what are your biggest concerns with both where we are in the climate crisis and with the climate action movement?
Yeah, I echo what Frances said, and I'm so grateful for this conversation so far. I think that, concerns come a lot of time from the unknown and the uncertainty, and I think that that's why the work I do as a storyteller and the entertainment industry is very important. No? This weekend I saw Extrapolations, which is a new TV show on Apple Plus TV. I recommend anyone watching it if you are interested in what we have been discussing so far. It's actually a great example of intergenerational narrative storytelling too, because it's a show that every episode happens a year in the future in the climate crisis. So the first episode is 2038, then it goes to 2043, 2047, and it'll go all the way to 2070. Meryl Streep is on it, Diane Lane and Don Cheadle. I mean, the cast is A-listers, is amazing. It's directed by Scott Burns, who did Contagious, the movie about the pandemic that everyone was watching at the beginning of COVID, thinking, oh my God, how did they know this was going to happen?
Right.
So it's a great TV show. And why I think it's important, and to your question about the challenges, is that we need to know what's coming. We need to prepare ourselves. We need to unpack and understand that this is an issue that is very multifaceted, very multi-layered, and it's not going to be one solution fits all. And that, like you both said, anthropologically is in the human condition to struggle about that and figure out how to grasp it. But why I'm so optimistic and hopeful about climate crisis is that, and I went to COP27 in Egypt this last year, and I'm planning on going to Dubai this year. And both countries are countries that homosexuality is not legal. They don't recognize, gay people like myself. But go into those countries and advocate together with the local communities and figure out how do we actually save the planet is what is going to bring us together as human race and therefore human rights. No, I think that I really think that the climate crisis is the most important issue, and it has the potential to advance gender justice, to advance social justice, and so many more issues alongside with it. So that's why it's worth it.
Boy, I think you're right. I hadn't really thought about that as much until we started talking about this and I started researching it. I mean, absolutely, there's overlaps in all of this. Yeah. The show is called Extrapolations.
Yes.
Extrapolations. Okay.
Yeah. Wendy, if I could mention one piece of short-term good news that we don't usually think about. Most of the climate crisis is coming from burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels create all sorts of different air pollutants that are huge problems for our health. Lots and lots of different things, and they cause a huge range of problems, everything from poor pregnancy outcomes to probably to Alzheimer's disease. Not that's the only cause, but that's something that contributes, and that whole range of life for huge numbers of people. But those air pollutants actually have a much shorter time in the atmosphere than something like carbon dioxide, which is going to be around for a very long time. So if we stop emitting, say, or we significantly reduce our emissions of soot, which is a big climate pollutant, but also a big air pollutant, things will be better in 2 weeks in terms of the quality of the air. That's how long the stuff actually lasts in the air. And so we could see, long before we see a big change in the climate, a big improvement in the climate, we could see a huge improvement in the quality of the air and a huge improvement in health because of that.
And we saw that during the pandemic, by the way.
During the pandemic, right?
It's not like we actually don't know at this point that that's true, because when the first, and now that it's March, it's like the 3-year anniversary. And those 2 weeks that people did stay inside worldwide, then you start realizing that natural, habitats all over were flourishing just because we let them be, as simple as that.
Yeah. And we have an organization here called Trees Upstate, where it's all about planting more trees to get some of that carbon dioxide out. So yeah, there are things we can do. One or two
I do want to
takeaways.
say apologies though, because we mentioned the pandemic, and I see someone just say, didn't we see some good effect during the pandemic? Yes, we did, and actually 2020 is the first year in many years that carbon emissions went down. The problem is the immediately after.
Exactly.
The fact that everyone pick up the pace, right? And obviously we've seen that with supply chain and everything, but I just don't want to get the impression that the pandemic solved things, because it just was a hiatus.
Right. It was just a moment in time there. We're running close to the end. So if you can give me one or two takeaways, either, something that you feel like is important for ways for people to get involved, things that we can do right now to make a difference, I would really appreciate that. So Frances, would you start?
Well, I'm sure I'd be remiss if I didn't mention for the elders in your audience, we would love to have you join Elders Climate Action. That's as simple as going to our website and filling out the form. It's there are no dues. You don't have to promise your firstborn grandchild. But we have about 25,000 members across the country, 10 active chapters, but certainly many of our members are not in chapters. So we'd love to have you involved and send you a newsletter every month with actions you can take. So definitely that. And I think the other takeaway is to realize that it's not hopeless and you're not powerless, that there's a lot that we can do together.
That's important. Thank you. So the website is eldersclimateaction.org, O-R-G. And to reach Frances, you can email her at frances.stewart6, the number 6, @gmail.com. Okay. And Samuel, what are a couple of takeaways from you?
Well, I think that, one of the takeaways is that there is a lot of things that you cannot cover in less than an hour about intergenerational climate movement building. So please, if you are interested in this issue, visit canyouhearus.org and find an intergenerational discussion guide in the Take Action section. It's an amazing resource that has several different topics, including how to navigate challenging intergenerational conversations, unpacking time and ageism. It has an interactive intergenerational game called Guess When, which is kind of like a alternative version of Guess Who, and you have to guess in what time, either past or future, is the person that you are role-playing with is based on, and you can say, oh, I think you are in the 2050s, oh, I think you are in the 1940s, and kind of like empathize and improve our ability to not take things for granted, and to know that every age comes with different perspective, different knowledge, and it's all valuable and priceless. And so I think that anyone will find this guide useful, as well as a map directory where you can find a lot of different local organizations to get involved. Elders for Climate Action is one of them, because the campaign has over 65 partners who generate. Elders for Climate Action are among them. So feel free to check out some of those resources that are always going to be there, and most importantly, get involved with the organizations in the front line who are doing this work day to day. And of course, I hope to see many people tomorrow joining the third act Day of Action. Here in LA, we're going to be in Beverly Hills. And I finally saw a comment asking for the source of the climate report. And that's coming from the IPCC. So if you go on Google and you put IPCC climate report, you will find the very long and scary and filled with graphic version, and that's why the role of journalists and storytellers and communicators like myself and so many others is important, because not everyone will have the capacity or ability to understand the reports, and we all need to share and make the knowledge accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Samuel, because I was calling it the wrong thing. I called it ICC, and it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is from the United Nations. And if you'd like to reach out to Samuel, you can email him at impact@samuelrubin, RUBIN.net. Wow. I'm going to have you guys back. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. You're right. And thank you. Thank you for giving me this time today. I know that you guys have so much on your plate, so I really appreciate the time. Before we go, let me just invite all of you back for the banter tomorrow. We might need it. We're talking about humor, and after the scariness of this conversation, but as Frances said, there is still hope, and Samuel in his stories also shows us there is still hope. We just need to be involved. But join us for the banter. If you're interested, email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz to get the link for that. And then if you are interested in seeing if you or someone you know might be a good kidney donor for Adam Lowe, you can email kidney4adam@gmail.com, and hopefully we can find something for Adam. Real quickly, next week is me doing a solo show, and I'm going to talk about the importance of taking a pause. We all are so busy and so impacted by what's going on around us all the time that sometimes it just is necessary, and we need to give ourselves permission to take that pause. And so I'm going to be talking about that next week. I hope you all will join me for that. And I always like to leave the audience with the belief that we can live with passion, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. Samuel and Frances, thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.